Steve Jobs, born on February 24th, 1955, and a few short days later was put up for adoption. He was then adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs, and they would love him unconditionally for the rest of his life. Being adopted did take a toll on Steve's life, though. He would show signs of being wanted and loved in little things that he would do. He grew up in what is now known as Silicon Valley, and at the age of 13 he met his long-term friend Steve Wozniak, who at the time was 18. His parents sent him off to Reed College in Oregon upon his birth parents' wish that he got a college education. This school was very expensive, and Steve only spent a semester there. He came back home and got a part-time job working for a video game store, and suddenly was very interested in what his friend Steve Wozniak was working on. They too were suddenly in this for the long run, and began to put together their first computer that could be used by everyone. They went to try and find someone to invest in them at the Homebrew Computer Club, and just minutes before arriving, decided that they would name this company something simple and easy to remember: Apple. They found someone to just begin by buying a few of their computer systems, and before they knew it, Steve Jobs had convinced Mike Markkula, executive for Intel, to invest $250,000 in Apple. Shortly after this investment, Apple came out with its next big item, Apple II. This was a computer that was all-in-one and even easier to use because Steve always wanted to make sure everyone could use his products. Steve was determined to get his next big product out there for the public to have and use, so he began working on Lisa. Now he came up with this name from the daughter he had through a past girlfriend that he did not want to believe was his. Steve was known for being very hard-headed, and lo and behold, he got thrown out of the Lisa project. Steve could not just sit around and do nothing, so he decided to pour his time into the Macintosh project. The 3 years Steve spent on this project proved to be some of his most hard-working years. You would think this would have been a flourishing time for Apple, when in reality it was a big sales drop. Steve did not want to believe that this company was failing, and this led him to getting kicked out of his own company. This did not bother him, though, because he had a new company idea in mind that would allow him to still do what made him happy. The Next Cube was born, and although it was quite successful, it was not Apple. Now in this time, Steve needed something to do, so he was called on by Pixar to help him create high-end computer graphics. This still did not help the sales of the Next brand, but soon that would change. In the 10 years since Steve had left the Apple company, had made a huge plummet, with new CEO Jill Amelio in charge of the company. Had no new options, so in December 1996, when Steve offered to come back only if he bought out Next, Jill did just that. Steve was back in his company and ready to create something new. Steve began to question all the teams in the company as to why they were important to the future of this company, and he got back interesting results. He began working on his next big project, and with the help of past employees of Next, he created the iMac. It had translucent sides and blew away everyone that saw it. Steve also created his first operating system and a few systems in the computer that had never been seen before. Now it is 2001 and everyone is buzzing because Steve has something new and big that will change the world. The iPod is introduced and takes the world by storm. No one has ever seen something so small that could hold so much music. The world suddenly notices Apple again, and it is great. Steve is glad that everyone enjoys this new project. Although it was great that the iPod was selling, Steve had to deal with Pixar and Disney. It was known that Pixar was doing great because Steve had helped them get the software they needed, but soon they would need to expand more. Steve had made it known that he would not even consider going to Disney unless CEO Michael Eisner was out. All of Disney agreed, and soon they received a new CEO, Bob Iger, and it was said that the first phone call he made was to Steve. Soon, Disney joined Pixar, and Steve became a member of the board as well as the largest stockholder. All was well for Steve, but he knew there was one thing he needed to change about Apple. They had been using the same processor since the company had began, and he decided it was time to change. In 2005, Steve made the announcement that he would be using Intel as the main processor, and within a year, all products used this processor. A few short years later, in 2007, Steve took the world by storm again when he announced his newest and best device, the iPhone. This would become one of the most wanted products. Although it was a bit pricey, it turned into the biggest selling product. Shortly after all this happened, Steve was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer that was said to be cured with surgery. Steve, being hard-headed, refused for 9 long months and chose to do other things instead, such as acupuncture and different diets. Eventually, he got the surgery and believed he was cancer-free, although he began to become rather thin. He still began working on his next big project, the iPad. All seemed to be going well until 2011, when his health seemed to plummet again. On October 5th, 2011, Steve died peacefully in his bed at home, only a day after the launch of the iPhone 4S. Steve was a great man who showed the world everything he could. Even today, Apple is still thriving with his absence because he left behind a great team of workers who know what he wanted and where he wanted his company to go. There are people out there who every year still do something in honor of Steve because of what he did, not just with computers, but technology. The following clip is from a movie made last year about his life, starring Ashton Kutcher, who is said to not be able to play the role correctly.
When you grow up, you tend to get told the world is the way that it is. Your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much. But that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is that everything around you that you call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. It's to shake off this erroneous notion that life is just there and you're just going to live in it versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. And once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
So, what are we gonna do now?
We're gonna pretend the universe. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.